little bit about Scott and April. Scott is the program director and founder of the GCA Center for Adult Autism. It's a program of the Chattanooga Autism Center. Scott founded the center in 2010 as he was looking for other adults on the autism spectrum. The center has support groups and social events that meet in Chattanooga and Dalton, Georgia. Over the course of this past year, the center has evolved to the point where Scott and April are doing workshop sessions on relationships. In July 2017, the center will be hosting a tri-state adult autism symposium in Chattanooga, which is going to be the first conference that is totally geared towards adult autism issues.
Amazing.
Scott and his wife April have been together for over 5.5 years and have been married to each other since May of 2015. And these two lovely people have the honor of raising 3 grandchildren together. And that is Quinn, who's 12, Melody, 9, and Harmony, who's 5.
Harmony, I love that.
So everybody please welcome.
Congratulations. Thank you. We appreciate that. As you alluded to, I'm Scott Kramer. I'm the founder and program director of the GCA Center for Adult Autism. Long story short, I had received a written notification in October of that year, and I was looking for support groups for adults in the autism spectrum. Well, I'm going through downtown Chattanooga to all these nonprofits, and there's nothing there. So I'm like, well, we got to do something about it. So I found it. And about a couple weeks after that, that's when I met April, and then I'll let April introduce herself.
Okay, well, I'll save the story for later, but I'm April and my last name is Jagger, but we are legally married. I was a teacher for 32 years, and I taught in public schools all over Georgia, and I want to go to Southern Adventist and get a master's in social work, but family has prevented. I applied like 2 years ago and still haven't started, so, someday.
Did you teach all different grades?
Oh, thank you for asking. Pre-K through 9, and then college methods classes.
I wish I'd start, so go pre-K.
Oh, yeah. My honest favorite was middle school, but I only did it for 1 year, but man. I was reading recovery, corrective reading, so, I love getting kids who can't read at all and getting them all the way to grade level in just a few months. That's pretty cool.
All right, basically, as you see, this will be a case study involving 2 adults with disabilities, April and myself. And just so that you know, there are no research studies whatsoever that tie in intentional relationships, and you'll find out what that is here in a second, to autism spectrum disorders. Now, when we give our presentation, yes, it's about adults with disabilities, but also keep in mind that I do come from an autism perspective, so that may shade or skew things a little bit. But one of the things that we want y'all to know is that healthy intentional relationships, various kinds, benefit adults throughout the lifespan, and we'll be sharing research techniques for initiating and sustaining those in interpersonal type of relationships. And then basically I'm sure many of you have been to a Chinese restaurant. It could be China Moon, it could be Forbidden Sea, whatever, but basically I saw that as take the plunge in a personal relationship, don't be scared. In other words, what does make a personal relationship an intentional relationship? And as you'll see, we got this from the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and you can read this for yourself. Basically, something that's intentional is basically planned or it's intended. You're gonna do it. And a relationship is where 2 people tend to talk to, behave, or deal with each other. So long story short, there you have it right there. It's basically 2 people who talk to, behave, or deal with each other in a way that's planned or intentional. And as you can see, it can be any type of relationship or backstage.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're on the outside looking in of a relationship. Some people's relationship, they may live together their whole lives, and it may be a platonic relationship. That doesn't mean that's less of a relationship. some disabled individuals, some autistic individuals are asexual, and that's a-okay, as long as it's okay with both of the people in the relationship. So we are talking about planned relationships, long-term committed relationships, but they may or may not be romantic or sexual.
And so basically, I'm not going to go through all this stuff. You have it on your handout, so you can read whatever you want. Just some of the things that I find that was really interesting about this. As most people know, about 1 in 5 people here in the United States have a disability. That number goes down to... Oh, we're sorry about that.
That's okay.
Go ahead and take one of these and pass
Oh,
it around.
I thought the moderator had one, I'm sorry.
We'll go ahead and wait here for that.
Thank you.
Did you have to give him to her?
I must have. That happens.
I was like, why is somebody following me along?
My handout.
So, one thing that we're especially concerned about is when there's a disability in the family. Now, that also includes children. There's about a 90% divorce rate. There's about an 80% divorce rate for adult, when at least one of the adults on the autism spectrum is on the autism spectrum. So, we're really concerned about that. This idea that that love and marriage relationships just happen. Well, that might be somewhat true for neurotypical people. That is not good for people with disabilities. These relationships need to be carefully planned. So that was our main concern in this presentation.
Very much so, but if you look at the last statistic, just go all the way down there, the lack of a social relationship, and again, this can be on any level, similar to what April talked about. If you look at the damage is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Long story short for myself, when I was diagnosed in 2007, I was in a committed relationship with someone else who was a licensed physician. And so when long story short, when all that ended and she diagnosed me unofficially in the spectrum and I ended up living on my own, I went into a funk for the next 6 to 9 months of my life. And I can only imagine what I was going through at the time. And if I'm going through like that, imagine all the other people that you're probably working with, adults and that sort of thing could be going through the same thing.
This is sort of our new thrust, is looking at the lack of relationships with people with disabilities as a health issue. Because, the statistics just came out that people on the autism spectrum die 20 years sooner than other people. And this is one of the main things that sustains life, is close interpersonal relationships.
And so the outline of our presentation will be looking to what initiates and builds an intentional relationship, how to sustain it, and then from a social work standpoint, how do you support those intentional relationships that adults have that have various disabilities. And then we look at the various research which is scattered all throughout the presentation. And so basically everything starts with, the true north compass that's within every person. Basically it's the idea about living a purpose-driven life. What is your purpose? What is your personal mission statement? What are you passionate about? What drives you? What makes you the person that you are? And so with that the passion and the purpose is the idea of the flow diagram that you see there. It's the idea about being in a zone. What drives you every day? And so there's basically 2 questions, and I'll have your goal.
I do want to comment on that, which what brought Scott and I together was our mutual interest in autism. I had a 15-year-old daughter. He was an adult who'd just been diagnosed. So, he'd been in a depression and then he'd come out of it and started GCA. So, we automatically had such a connection and such a common purpose and drive in life. And so you want to think about that with your clients. What really drives them? What person could they connect with that there would be synergy that would make their life and the other person's life even stronger? Because, you can do some of that yourself, of putting friendships together. The things that your clients need to ask themselves at whatever level is appropriate for them is, am I ready for an intentional relationship? You know, have I worked on myself? Am I where I want to be? Are my basic needs met? Am I taking care of myself? You know, because when I divorced before I met Scott, I mean, I just completely took care of myself for a couple of years, emotionally, and my children, of course, who were very traumatized. I wasn't even thinking about it. And I think that's the best way, you know, not to jump right out of one bad situation into a new situation. The second question your kind of clients need to ask is, what kind of relationship are they looking for? I mean, do they want a really close friend? Do they want a romantic relationship? Do they want a sexual relationship? So, you know, help them to explore, what is it you're really looking for?
And then, where will somebody find one of these type of relationships? There's a couple, I've listed like 4 or 5 different things. Social media, online dating sites out till April, and I found each other. We're looking at things like community events. There's community events going all the time. You look at the Chattanooga Times-Free Press, or if you're from Dalton or Cleveland, whatever, you look at that town's newspaper, there's community events listed all the time. And again, it could be a special interest that someone has, could have something that's involved trains or whatever. You know, there's the idea about work and volunteering. People meet through there, but they don't think, especially when it comes to volunteering, you know, the idea how people get together for a common purpose. Could be, you know, they volunteer for the Chattanooga Food Bank or something like that. You look at support groups. I don't know what goes behind the scenes between the support group meetings that I run, but I've heard that there's things that go on. And then there's other possibilities. So you can kind of see, we have things like potluck dinners with our support groups, so that's a great way for adults that can meet each other.
I was going to quickly tell you how we met. We actually met, there was a chance on the online format to say what you're looking for. You're looking for a friend, you know, relationship, marriage, whatever. And I was looking for a friend who would reintroduce me to the Chattanooga area. I went to UTC, but I've been away for 30 years. So, and Scott at that time didn't have a car. He was Sierra Club treasurer and he walked everywhere. And so I knew that he'd really know the city because he walked everywhere. And also the activism that he had in the city. So, you know, we just started talking online and it went from there. Scott has a nephew who is in a relationship, and he and his fiance are both lower functioning. They met through work at their workshop. So, and then with the support of their parents, they were able to, at this point, they're living together, you know, where they were both in group homes previously. Wow. So.
All right. And then I'm not going to go over this entire slide, but I will go over the bullet points of this. You know, there's 2 things that people need to take into consideration. The first of all is the flexibility about disability. And you think, if you look at the part that's bold there, the cultural stereotypes and prejudice, how they continue to exact a high cost. What I mean by that is that when you look at how children with disabilities grow up, they're prejudiced and marginalized for various reasons. Those things go on to adulthood, and as such, the stereotypes that they might have had about kids carry on as well. And if you look further down, it also says the idea about conferring patronizing assumptions about the real reasons for the relationship. In other words, you know, you might hear people talk about somebody who's an adult who has a disability talking about why you're there because you want somebody to feel sorry for you or whatever.
Okay, this is my slide then.
Yes. Sorry about that.
Yes. The first thing that your clients need to do is be open-minded. Open-minded about whether or not their partner or their friend might have a disability or not. Also, their parents need to be open-minded because when Scott said we both have disabilities, mine is ADHD, but I can basically cover. I mean, I think a lot of kindergarten teachers have ADHD probably. You know, it was mostly difficult in my home life. But, my mom and nobody really considered me as having a disability. So when Scott and I were friends for several years, And then we began a romantic relationship. My mom was like, how? How could you possibly do that? You know, and you know, Scott is much more smooth and polished now than he was 6 years ago, and so am I. You know, much more healed because of the relationship we have with each other. So that's one thing. Don't close your mind about. I mean, a disabled and a non-disabled person can have a great deal in common. Two disabled people can have a great deal in common. So you know. Don't be patronizing. And don't think, I have a very close friend who is, I'm not sure, probably intellectually disabled, very close. And again, my mom, who has been a teacher all her life, she's a great person. She's like, why do you hang out with her? I know you pity her, but I'm like, what? She's one of my best friends. She is a wonderful jam-up mother. And for me, that's huge. So, again, that was just what I wanted to say about that.
And then one of the things I'll talk about is the idea about how people who have disabilities, autism, whatever you want to call it, it's the idea that they can hide, you can run, but you can't hide nowhere. It's the idea that you can't hide whatever this disability, whatever long term. From an autism perspective, it's and the reasons why they try to hide it is if they try to disclose, it's the idea about feeling awkward, or you're judged by autism or whatever it is that you have, and people don't like that. People like to know that they're accepted, and when they're not accepted, well, there's the constant rejection. And the thing about rejection for people who have disabilities is once it builds on, it's like a snowball effect. So that's the reason why anybody who has a disability, they have to learn to accept that disability, like it, and then love themselves. And then you have Maxine Aston, who's a British researcher and wrote the book Asperger's in Love. She talks the idea about how men on the autism spectrum, I don't know if this is totally true for men who have disabilities, but for men who have autism, it's the idea about sealing the deal. It's like the idea about trying to get to the so-called finish line, if you want to call it that, or try to get to the end of it, and thinking, okay, once they see the deal, then they're fine being in a relationship. But one of the things about people, probably not just autistic men, but men in general who have disabilities, it's the idea about being bullied. You look at a boy who's in a wheelchair, may have been bullied, may have been teased about, being in a wheelchair, whatever. And then the idea about the history of being bullied, it's the idea that it impresses person being wife, partner criteria. I'm not exactly sure what I put that down.
Okay.
So we'll skip that.
Just move on.
Email me on that if you need to know what that is, and I'll get right back to you. And then Ashley Stanford, who wrote last year the book Asperger's Syndrome in Long-Term Relationships, she sees courting as a form of acting. In other words, people who have Asperger's, people who have a form of autism, are known to, because they don't generally come out with their feelings and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And because they have to hide those things and not disclose their disability, they act it out.
Yep, they get their ideas about relationships from movies.
Right.
So they act out what they think.
Exactly.
Sometimes-
Instead of feeling down here, they think up here.
Sometimes porn movies.
Right.
So they're like acting out a script while they're trying to seal the deal in the relationship. And then when they got that relationship locked in, they don't have to use their scripts anymore. They just kind of go back to whatever. So you need to prepare people for marriage, or long-term relationships are different than dating.
Right.
And let me go back to the history of being bullied point. I apologize for that earlier. Basically, when I talk about impresses the person being the wife partner criteria, let's say that I'm the person who's been bullied for a large part of life. And there's April right there. Now, April has certain criteria that she wants, in her person, in her man, whatever. She wants this, she wants that, so it's easy to come across. So that way we don't feel bullied.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah, this is mine. Okay, if you have not seen the show Autism, the movie, it's on YouTube. Autism in Love. It is amazing.
Okay.
But not just as a movie about autism or a movie about people with disabilities and their feelings, but just as a movie. I mean, it's just so heartwarming. So, but Dave in this movie, Autism in Love, which Scott actually has been in communication with Dave and his wife, he said that his formula is 25% looks, that the looks of the person have to be acceptable to him. That's 25%. 25% is the person's personality. But 50% is how the person treats him.
Yes.
Which I think this is probably a good criteria for any person. Because I know so many people in relationships that they're not giving much weight to how the person treats them. So, but that's, that's how he chose his wife and developed his relationship with her. In Atwood, women who, they're looking for men that have a similar personality to themselves, expectations and lifestyle choices. In other words, they're looking more for practical things. And a lot of people on the autism spectrum are very good at one particular thing. And sometimes it's a thing that makes them a great deal of money. And then they're able to act their way through the courtship. And, the woman thinks I've got it made, and then she's basically with someone who never regards or understands her feelings because he never really did. So that's why we think intentional relationships and developing the relationship so important. Another thing is one of the people in a disability couple needs to be at the high end of the empathy what am I saying? Scale, thank you. Spectrum, that's the word I was looking for. Actually, research has found that the most successful autism, non-autism relationships are with a super nurturer. So I think, in our case, 32 years, 4 children.
Nurturer.
I kind of qualify, 32 years of teaching. So, because honestly, one person does have to carry more than the other. Now, in the disabled couple, the nephew is a super nurturer. He is caring for his partner very, very well, even though he himself has a disability. She's more wild, off the cuff, which she has a more severe intellectual disability, and she brings like zest and zing to his life. So it's a good relationship. So, and then these are just some ideas. Some animals are very important. It's really good to match up people with similar special interests.
Are these all books that you have listed?
Yes, they are.
Yes.
Like even you're talking about the Autism in Love? Is that?
No, that's on YouTube.
That's on
It's
YouTube,
a
you can rent it or
movie.
buy it.
It's a movie, okay.
It's a documentary.
Then everything else is.
Is it in
Yes.
here?
I have a reference sheet, and also if you look
Yeah,
toward
it's in
the end
the
of your thing here, there's like a page list of references.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
And then let's go to disabilities in general. Basically, it's just overall woman, they're looking for somebody they can trust, the respect issue, wanting to get to know them, taking the time to do that, looking for that companion, someone to do things pretty general. Us guys, the love, honesty, the compassion, compatibility. The 50-50 two-way street, I'm not necessarily buying to that per se, because people talk about 50-50 relationships and that sort of thing, so where is 50-50, that sort of thing. As April has alluded to in the past, it's 100-100.
That's
It's a
it.
totally buy-in.
Yes.
Totally buy-in. And then one quote that I'll mention from this young lady here who has muscular dystrophy. She emphasizes the part about, she likes the fact that we're a team, you rely on each other to overcome whatever life throws at us. And so that's what makes her happy. And I just wanted to stress that.
And that is exactly what we do, because about 8 months after we met each other, my daughter died, and she had 5 children, and then in a few months. I mean, Scott actually, the father hid with him. He was responsible for the death. And then Scott found him through research, and then I got custody. So,
That's
you know,
amazing.
we've been through so much together. Life has thrown so much at us.
And then for people with disabilities, not just autism, but for people with disabilities in general, the idea about needing to progress at a slower pace, and I'll mention, I've been married twice, divorced once. First marriage is pretty rushed. My first wife I met online. We saw each other, every other weekend for about a year. About 2 months after first talking to her, I proposed to her, which was a big mistake. But didn't realize because no one said, well, you shouldn't be doing this, but I did. So a couple of years, so a year and 2 months goes by. I get married. 3 years later, I get divorced. And it just wasn't a good situation for myself. Now, the second marriage, which is to April, she's already alluded to the fact that we knew each other for like 5.5 years or whatever, 4.5 years, 5.5 years before we got married. So we've taken the time. We worked. The thing is, when you're working with your clients, that sort of thing, make sure that they take the time to get to know other people, because there's nothing like a rushed marriage.
It's very important that they see each other in a variety,
Yes.
a huge variety of circumstances. That they see each other under pressure, that they see each other sleepy and sick and all these different things, because they're not going to be anticipating that. So it's just so important to slow it way, way, way down. And again, talking about his nephew, the parents, the mothers, they had a powerful incentive. We had to jump through all these hoops to get out of group homes and to get in the same place together. And they didn't get to see each other much because their group homes were fairly far apart, although they'd been at the same workshop for work. So the parents set guidelines, and this would be a role the social worker could do too. You need to do this to get to this step, and you need to do that to get to this step. Because, like first they had to keep their nose cleans, no discipline infractions in their homes before the plan would even start for a period of time. And this went on. And what really surprised me was that the parents, these were both mothers, they made the restriction on the young people that they could not be intimate once they lived together. That this was a living situation, and that this was not just woo-hoo, go, and I'm surprised that the kiddos, the 20-year-old kiddos, 28, went along with that, but they did. And they showed, because what the parents wanted to see, do you really love each other? Are you going to take care of each other? Is this, and especially the mother of the girl who had a stronger disability, is this going to be an exploitative situation for my daughter? And it wasn't until both parents were convinced, and then after 6 months, the kids came to him and said, we really think we're ready. And the parents talked with them and decided that they were, and gave their blessing. And the little girl went, woohoo! So.
And the other thing I wanted to, Rudy Simone writes in here about 22 things, is that people on the autism spectrum, and I would presume this would be true of people with disabilities, need the personal space. For somebody like myself, when I get home and all of a sudden I got a 5-year-old, a 9-year-old, 12-year-old come up to me, it's great, but I really need my space to adjust. All right.
7:15. Okay, teamwork is important, and it has to be built consciously, consistently, slowly. It doesn't just happen, okay? Especially in relationships with disabilities. And the functional aspects of the relationship have to be recognized. It's not just, you have to prepare them for it is not just how you feel that day or how he feels that day, because feelings are a lot different in some ways for people with disabilities. But you need to point out to them as they're developing their relationships, look what he does for you. Look what she did for you that day, and point out, these are good things. You have a friend. You have somebody there with you if you're scared or if you need medical attention. To sustain the relationship through the times when they just may not feel in love. So, next slide.
All right. Then, as I mentioned about my second marriage, I went from a roommate who was 40-something to a very large family. So, patience, patience, patience. And let me tell you, when you talk about at the bottom about the fight versus flight response, I felt a lot of that stuff kick in right away. But one of the things that I remembered is that, as it mentions the key, the best friendship that I share with April. There's a reason why I'm in this marriage with April. It's not because, well, hey, it's great. I went from having a roommate to this large family. No, it's because I love her and just all the things that we share with each other, our interests and everything else. It's great.
Up till a couple months ago, we had 2 adolescents,
Ooh.
young adults with disabilities,
Oh, yeah.
autism and bipolar,
Mm.
in addition to the 3 grandchildren. So yes, it was a shocking transition. And the bipolar child was not very stable, and he is now living with his father. It's his senior year. But coming back to our friendship, I'm telling you, our feelings were all over the place every day because of basically the verbal abuse we experienced from the one teenager and just the chaos of that many children. You know, I did 16 loads of laundry a week. So, you know, and this is one thing, you know, they say don't go to bed angry. Wrong. So you cannot resolve things sometimes when you're so tired. So, you know, we would just get in bed, hug each other, snuggle, and say we'll start again tomorrow trying to figure this out. And one really important thing for me to communicate with Scott, and this is maybe autism specific, is I have to make pictures with words. You know, I have to say something like, you know, I feel like a cardboard box on the side of the road that somebody ran over after you said that to me. You know, so because if I just say, I am so sad, he's like,
Right.
I don't even catch his attention. And basically, this is a male thing too. So ladies,
Yes.
and teach your female clients, make those word pictures for feelings. Because men are not that in touch.
Because the thing about it, because the thing about it is with men on the autism spectrum like myself, we're very intelligent, we get a lot of things, but when you talk about feelings, that's something that we don't quite get.
Right.
So that's the reason why when it said be blunt, be blunt with people like me, I even had to tell her, I said, please be blunt with me. Because it's not a good thing.
Hands don't work.
No. It's like you're just trying to get around things, put your foot in whatever. But there's that. So now we get into the social work part of this. Basically, how do you support those
Social
relationships?
justice.
So there's the way I looked at it, there's 3 keys. The first of all is developing the idea what social justice is. And I took this from the National Association of Social Workers website to kind of help you all here. Basically, trying to open doors of access and opportunity to everyone, particularly those in great need and greatest need being people with disabilities. And so,
And I told you about Tony and Wendy, but the point here is their parents could have just said, no, you know, you're in a home, you've got a full-time, in Indiana, they must be rich up there or something, because it was 2 boys and they had a full-time round-the-clock caregiver. And then Wendy is in more of a group situation. But they could have said, you're just fine where you are, you don't need to, you know, spend time with your girlfriend. And so, but they really believed what Emma Thompson, love that they found that quote, being disabled should not mean being disqualified from having access to every aspect of life.
I love that.
I love that too.
So we go from social justice to key number 2 about understanding that disability rights are pretty much civil rights. So we look at what
Very
disability justice is. And a lot of people don't talk about that there is a thing called disability justice. And the quote, I'll just read this here. It's pretty much a multi-issue political understanding of disability and ableism that moves to a framework that centers justice and wholeness for all disabled people and communities. So ableism is the idea that if you take somebody like myself and you take somebody else who doesn't have a disability, there's rights, there's privileges that go along with that. That's ableism. So you take so instead of it being like a difference or whatever you want to call it, It's the idea of that it's inclusiveness, it's togetherness, it's wholeness. And then I kind of touch on ableism a little bit, but ableism doesn't equal inability for adults with disabilities, and you can kind of see the definitions there. I won't go over it. Ableism is pretty much a type of discrimination, whereas disability is basically a disability, what that is. So basically, we go from those three keys to what are things that all of you can do and things that you can share with your coworkers. Pretty much, how can you assist a differently able adult? You know, first of all, is having a mindset, and it is a mindset, because in order to have the mindset for social and disability justice, you can't possibly be supportive and also be able to role play with these individuals to get them prepared for what it is that they need to do. So let's talk about the mindset a little bit. Basically, it's the belief that all individuals are worthy, and that's a key word, worthy of healthy, interpersonal, and even intimate relationships. Basically, it's an affirmation toward your clients. If you believe that, you're saying to your clients, say, I believe in you, I believe what you want to do. And pretty much, no mindset equals you're not pretty much saying you're affirming you're not supportive of these people that you work with. And then with that, again, social justice, the idea about equal rights and opportunities, and then disability justice, I've already described that.
Okay, this move toward full and inclusive relationships for people with disabilities goes along with what's going on in the disability community as far as employment.
Right.
You know, we're moving to community-based employment, community-based living, and, you know, living in relationship with another person, disabled or not, is part of this spectrum we're moving from having canned living places and workplaces and relationships, not necessarily of the individual's choice, to more openness and diversity and choice for people as full human beings.
Okay. So basically, one of the things that you can also do in being supportive is dealing with those negative societal attitudes that you hear about. One of the most common ones is that disability is a burden. You know, why should we treat people who have disabilities, be it autism, be it a physical disability, intellectual disability, whatever? Why? Because it's a burden. It's one of the societal attitudes that we have developed over time. And the thing, even in disabilities itself, it seems to me like you have autism being one disability, you have this disability, this disability. It's easy for somebody like myself that comes across as being intelligent and all that sort of thing, to be able to look on someone who might have an intellectual disability and say, well, you're not, it would be easy to say, well, you're not as intelligent, blah, blah, blah. But the thing about it is, even with people like myself, I do my best to be supportive and try to help remove those negative attitudes.
Disability is both a burden and a gift. Often people with disabilities have unique skills and talents to them. Our youngest grandchild is disabled. She was born with agenesis of the corpus callosum, which means the two sides of her brain are not joined. She's got some benign tumors. Basically, when they looked at it prenatally, they said, there are things there in the brain that shouldn't be there, and there are things that should be there that are missing. And we knew that prenatally, but the mom, my daughter, was basically running from family violence, you know, as long as she lived, 8 months of the child's life. And then, you know, she was absolutely neglected in the setting she was in for about 6 months until I got custody. So she had never seen a doctor. She had never had formula since her mother died when she was breastfed. So, you know, I got a baby that was completely floppy, couldn't hold her own head up at 14 months, the size of a newborn, you know, and she did not walk until she was 2.5 years old, and she did not talk until she was 4. But she has the most special quality She is an empath. She can tell if anybody in the room is sad, and she will go over to them, and she will put their head on her shoulder and pat their back. You know, and now she can walk and talk. You know, she's still delayed, but so it's both a burden and a gift, and we need to recognize the gifts and the strengths of those with disabilities. And you know, as I was talking about my friend, I like her for herself. I don't feel sorry for her. Yes, I give her rides because she doesn't have a car, but that's not because I'm taking care of her. It's because I enjoy the conversation we have, and we talk about our children, and she gives me ideas. When I found out that my 12-year-old grandson was depressed, or I felt he was, she was one of the first people I talked to. You know, because she has a 12-year-old son. And there's a lot of discussion right now. How many of you think that people are more toward person first, a person with autism? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of you have moved to a autistic person? So it's really up for debate right now. Scott doesn't really care, I don't think. My daughter is very strong about she's autistic. So, you know, you need to kind of find out from your client how you want them, like if you were to bring somebody with you and introduce them,
How they want to be
how
identified.
would they want to be, you know, exactly. Thank you.
All right. And then there are things that you can do when you you're working with adults who have various disabilities.
Is to role play. Yes, role play how to meet someone, how to ask them to, you know, how to say, you know, do you want to get together? People with disabilities don't just already know these things. How many of you use role play in your practice? Okay, so we were just going to do a quick example. Okay. Okay, Scott and I are next to each other at the food bank. We're putting vegetables in bags. We're counting out the cabbages and onions for a drive-through food bank, and we're next to each other, and we haven't met each other.
How are you doing today?
I'm okay.
Right. Is your first time here?
No, I've been here a few times before, but I haven't seen you before.
You know, I've been here several times. I've just never seen you before. So what brings you here?
Well, I think it's important that people in our community have food. That's important to me.
Really?
Why are you here?
I'm doing it because I know I don't like to be too personal first, but I kind of grew up, you know, not having much food and everything else, and so being here kind of reflects, you know, I guess on those experiences.
I did too. I used to have to bake a cake for my brothers every day.
Really?
Because flour and sugar were cheap back then, and my mom was at work working a second job until 11, and I had a brother that was 13. He was a bottomless pit, and they didn't have enough to eat. We didn't have enough to eat. We never knew where our next meal was coming from. So that's why I don't want other people to have to go through that.
Really? Wow. That's pretty cool. So
Are you going to be here next time?
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. Well, yes, I'm pretty committed to doing the rest of the times this year. So, would you like me to email you and tell you when the next time is?
That would be great.
Okay. All right. Well, when we're done, you give me your email, and I'll tell you when the next time is, because we really need help here. You know, we need as many people as possible.
Awesome.
And so as you can see, I mean, you take somebody who has a disability and they're like, well, how do I really get to know that? So in a setting like this, I mean, it's like the idea that April and I, even though this was kind of like a real life example, we're able to make those connections by bouncing off of each other. She says one thing, I bounce off of that, she bounces back off of that. So that's something that you can work with your clients. Let's say that they're meeting somebody it's like you kind of give them tips, pointers, and that sort of thing.
Don't just give them tips and pointers. I
Role
mean,
playing.
go over the conversation, just like
Yes.
we did. And try to get in the head of the person that they're gonna be communicating with, because most of you aren't autistic and you can probably do that. You know, get into that other person's head so that you'll give them conversation that might be likely to happen.
Right. And the thing that I'll just mention down here at the bottom, it's pretty much what April and I were doing. You open up the communication, you share those experiences, which leads to those relationships.
And when we were first getting to know each other online, he had this list of 1,000 questions. And he would ask me one each day, and I would answer it by email. We didn't live in the same city at that time. And then he would answer it himself. So by the time that we met for the first time in person, I already knew what his childhood pet was and his favorite color and what we were going to order that night, which was veggie pizza that we both loved. So that was one way that we planned our relationship. A second way that we did it was and this may or may not be appropriate for your clients, or maybe at a simpler level, was to, we read books, underlined, wrote in them, and exchanged them. Because even though we had no intention of being married or even knew if we were gonna have I could tell when I met him, I wanted to be friends with him for the rest of my life. And we wanted to build that relationship very, very strong. And we even talked about how we were gonna fight. And then we didn't for 4 years. But it's come in handy quite a few times.
Awesome.
Oh, right here, one of the things you need to tell your clients is no over-the-top stuff, okay? Because Scott's signature first date move was a dozen roses. Whoa. That's way over the top. So, and I know Tony, it's always, diamond jewelry, or, whatever little money he has, he tries to just wow his girlfriend. So you need to really encourage him not to do that until they're in a serious relationship. And work with adults on what is appropriate. Of course you know that. It's not appropriate to talk about people's body parts and, what are appropriate. And you might even give them a little list. What are the appropriate topics for conversation? Because they may not know.
Right, and as I mentioned earlier, and this is with people who have autism or even people who might have an intellectual disability, be blunt. Don't make me guess, don't, do whatever. In other words, kind of like with Simon Baron-Cohen, another British researcher, and the father of theory of mind says, don't guess. And the quote I'll just read down here at the bottom is, in brief, having a theory of mind is to be able to reflect on the contents of one's own and another's mind. Difficulty to understand that is a core cognitive feature of autism spectrum conditions.
Are there references or books you talked about?
Okay.
Conversation starters, that sort of thing for autism?
Wow, that's a good question.
Some kind. What I'm saying? Some kind.
I don't know where you got the 1,000 questions, but those were
Basically,
really good.
that's one of those things, if anybody wants to email me, just email me, because I don't have that information on me right now. I can get that question, I can get that
Email
information.
will tell you. There is a book called, I know what it is. You might want to write this down. It's called Intellectual Foreplay. And that is exactly what it's about. It's, getting your minds to before your bodies. Okay, the next slide is the references.
That's a book, right?
Yes, it is. Intellectual Foreplay. And there are other books about questions in relationships, but I cannot believe the people that get married that really don't know anything about the other person except maybe what they like in bed. It's just, they don't know about their childhood, they don't know about their family, and they're shocked when they meet the in-laws. They're like, these people raised you? Because those stories have never been shared. So there are the references that we have talked about in this presentation.
And basically, just to go over the summary of this, we talked about initiating, building, and sustaining an intentional relationship. We talked what this type of relationship was. In part, we educate social workers about how to support those type of relationships. throughout this presentation, we shared findings on research. And then at this time, we'd like to open it up for discussion if you have any questions for both
And
of
if you'll
you.
switch to the next slide. There's our contact information. We also gave you business cards. We are available especially by phone or email or CAC Facebook. So, thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
How open are you to talk about your personal experience with, you said you didn't get diagnosed?
I don't do diagnosis.
No,
He
no.
wants to know your story.
Your personal story.
Oh, how I was
I mean,
diagnosed.
how did you know that, I mean,
He'll tell you
was
everything.
there a revelation or a realization that came to you? Well, how old you were maybe?
Well, I was 40 years old, so I was later in life, one of those later in life adults that was diagnosed in the autism spectrum. What happened was I've been fired for more times than I don't know how many count, but I've been fired a large number of times. And at the most recent time, I had been fired from a prominent nonprofit. I won't mention which one it is, but I had been fired from a prominent nonprofit. And so I was talking with my then girlfriend, who is a licensed physician, and she diagnosed me unofficially as being on the autism spectrum. There's two things that usually happen when someone's diagnosed with a disorder. Usually they're like, oh my gosh, it's a relief. It's like this big weight comes off. Or they do what I did, which is the woe's me attitude. It's like, woe's me that you tell me that after all these things I've accomplished and all these years now you're telling me I gotta deal with this thing called autism. That's pretty much how it was. But the thing about it is, even when I was diagnosed unofficially, I'd never received any written documentation whatsoever, and that's what I've been seeking for. So for the next 3 years after that, I went to and fro in Tennessee and Georgia to try to get a official diagnosis, and I was able to do that.
VR, finally, Georgia VR diagnosed.
Oh,
even though
vocational
you lived
rehab?
in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And I'll share my own experience with I have a 15-year-old on the spectrum with Asperger's. And he was identified with ADD in kindergarten. His initial evaluation was for autism spectrum, but he didn't meet criteria, and this was in Texas. And so for many years, and initially I was like, how dare you think my child is autistic? Like I wanted to scratch her eyes out. I was mad. And so he had a diagnosis of ADD and, was served under special ed for many, many years, was evaluated at reevaluation time many, many times. They always evaluated him for autism spectrum, and he could never meet criteria. And so we moved to Chattanooga, and he was at East Hamilton, and he was evaluated and finally was identified. And it was almost like we were so grateful, because it was like the pieces of the puzzle fit, because there were so many behaviors we were seeing that didn't make sense about ADD and that kind of thing. So his diagnosis happened later on as well.
Like on the other side, I have a child that has autism, and he was diagnosed at 18 months old. And I have a child that has Asperger. So this is all new, because now my older son that is full autistic is coming to the time of college.
He's 18, right?
Yes, he's 18 years old. So I'm trying to learn as much as I can, because he loves girls, and the boundaries and the way you talk to him, and the other side I have the Asperger child that is he just flies by the seam of his little pants, but socially, he can function, but then, the basic social skills, he's fixing to go to middle school, which is a totally different, routine. It's just totally different. So I appreciate y'all so much.
Yes.
we presented on intentional relationships at the Chattanooga Autism Center's conference last year. Our next year's presentation is Sex on the Spectrum.
Ooh.
Oh, you're interested in that.
When is the day?
It's always
Friday, April
it's in April.
21st, 2017.
We didn't go to the conference this year. We go every year, but we didn't go.
I used to go at.
And I would give anything if I had these resources to give to his girlfriend. He had a serious relationship in college, and she, bless her heart, even bought him the love languages book and
Yes.
said, "Will you please read this?"
Uh-huh.
You know, and he just couldn't take those steps that she needed him to take. And they were together for like 3 years.
Wow.
And she was ready for more of a relationship, and he just could not go there. And the only time I've seen him actually weep since he was a little bitty guy, he always had his emotions very controlled. Once he figured out how to control it at about 7, how to rein
Right.
himself in and use the tools we were giving him in therapy to stay where he needed to be.
So is he on the spectrum?
Yes.
Does he attend any support or social events
No.
for
Right.
people? Well,
I
Oh
know.
my
I'm
God.
so excited.
Right.
we are very excited. We have lots of guys and gals in that age. More guys and gals, of course, in that age range. But you know, and
Do you guys have things for adolescents,
That's what
or is
I
it
was
just
gonna
adults?
The CAC has a teen group.
They do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But once a person is in that thinking about career and transition, they're welcome.
Okay.
You know, so
So
16, 17, 18,
Yeah.
when you think they're at that.
Okay. Very good to know. Thank you guys so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
and do y'all do a lot